Hi, everyone. Can folks hear me? Cool. I think we're going to get started here. I'm G from the Atlanta Radical Book Fair Collective, and I'm very grateful to be joined here today by JoNina Abron-Ervin and Lorenzo Kom.boa Ervin for a discussion on Black anarchism and anti-fascism. So we'll do some introductions, we'll get into some prepared remarks by JoNina and Lorenzo, and then we'll move to a Q&A with about 20 minutes left in the programming today. So, JoNina Abron-Ervin is an activist, a writer, and a retired university journalism educator. She's the author of Driven by the Movement, Reports from the Black Power Era. For nearly a decade, she was a member of the Black Panther Party, serving as the last editor of the Black Panther newspaper. From 2000 to 2003, JoNina also led a campaign to stop the naked jailing of Black men in Kalamazoo, Michigan. She is the former managing editor of the Black Scholar magazine and the co-host of the Black Autonomy podcast. In the recent release of her book, Driven by the Movement, which is available for sale out in the main hall, JoNina delivers an in-depth report on the Black Power era, describing the contributions of 21 activists whose names remain otherwise unknown. In this prismatic narrative of the Black liberation movements of the late 20th century, she reflects the mergers and contradictions of a multifaceted movement engaged in the struggle. Driven by the Movement reminds us that social revolution is made by ordinary people, each responsible for a crucial task in the tapestry of our liberation. Welcome, JoNina.
I want to thank the Radical Atlanta Book Fair for having me and Lorenzo here today. Is that good? You can't, okay, good. All right.
I'll introduce Lorenzo really quickly. Ooh, you got it.
I'm Lorenzo Kom.boa Ervin, former of the Black Panther Party, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, currently still with the Black Autonomy Federation. Lived here years. I hadn't been back here in 30 years, actually. I'm very, very happy to be here.
Right now in this country, as many of you, I hope, know, we are living in the early stages of a fascist state. And I'm here today to talk about one aspect of that fascism that often doesn't get the attention that it deserves, and that is censorship, which is a critical part of the creation of a fascist state. I want to quote from the late award-winning Black author, Toni Morrison. She wrote an article several years ago when she was talking about fascism in books and literature. And this is a quote from the article. It was called Peril. And I quote, "Authoritarian regimes, dictators, despots are often, but not always, fools. But none is foolish enough to abandon control, overt or insidious, over media. Writers can disturb the social oppression that functions like a coma on the population. A coma despots call peace, and they stanch the blood flow of war that hawks and profiteers thrill to. The efforts to censor, starve, annihilate writers are clear signs that something important has taken place. Cultural and political forces can sweep clean all but the safe, all but the state-approved art." And as a journalist myself for about a half a century, I can definitely relate to this. I'm a writer, and people like myself, like Lorenzo's any of you today who are here, who are writers, we have to all be concerned about this. If we look back in history, in Germany in 1933, which obviously the United States and Germany are two completely different countries, and I'm not saying that they aren't different and they have different cultures and different histories. But one of the things that the Nazis did when they began to take power in Germany was to censor books. They had book burnings. If you go on YouTube sometimes and just type in book burnings by Nazis, you will see a documentary on that. That's one of the things they wanted to do, was to eliminate all articles, all thought, all criticism of what they were doing. Because if you can destroy that, if you can get rid of it, it does a couple of things. For the young people who are really, really young, they'll never know what happened, you hope. And then for those who may be critics, who may criticize the authoritarian regime, they will be afraid. It will put terror into their hearts. And of course, the people who were opposed to those book burnings, they dared not speak out, because not only might their books be burned, but they might also be killed, which the Nazis did do when they decided they needed to do. So this is something that we all have to be concerned about, and we have to look at history. And it's one of the reasons why censorship is so important as a facet of fascism, because the authoritarians, the fascists, don't want us to be able to look to history, to be able to know what happened in the past, because they want to stamp out all negative things about the society so they can, recreate a society that never did exist, a perfect society. One of the things that the MAGA movement likes to say is, well, we have to get rid of, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion in some of the books, because they make white people feel bad. They make white children feel bad. Well, my reaction to that was, well, they should feel bad that it happened in their country. There's nothing wrong with that. But it didn't happen to them, so why did they feel bad? I remember as a kid in the 1950s, being in elementary school, having to read books about enslavement, and yeah, definitely feeling very bad and not understanding why did this happen, to my ancestors. And I am the, great-granddaughter of slaves on both sides of my family. So as I read about it as a kid in the 1950s, trying to figure out why would anybody do anything like this to us. But the authoritarians, the fascists that have come to power in this country, that are steadily building their power, they haven't totally built it yet. And we have to fight to stop that. We can't just sit silently by and let them do it. But as they day by day and step by step do it, they want to erase our collective memory. They don't want us to remember how bad things were. As was said earlier, I'm a former member of the Black Panther Party. And one of the things the Black Panther Party said in the 10-point platform and program was that we want an education. I'm paraphrasing right now because I don't have the exact words in front of me. We want an education that reflects our true nature in this decadent American society. We want to understand our true relationship to American society. And this is what Huey Newton and Bobby Seale wrote 59 years ago this month, October 1966, when they started the Black Panther Party. Well, if you don't understand your true history, then you cannot work to improve your lives. You cannot work to improve your in society as a whole if you don't understand it. And we understood in the Black Panther Party how important it was to know your true history. But right now, as I said before, the move is being made to totally wipe out the true history of people. And we have to all be afraid of that. What does that mean? If you think about it, what if the children who are born to the younger members of Gen Z and the generation after that, which I'm not quite caught up on the latest generation, their name. But what if their children, if this movement right now to wipe out our true history, what if that's successful? These young kids who are not yet born, who are in the future, they won't know about what happened. They might not even know about what's happening right now, because there's a move to totally wipe it out. So we have to understand that that is a key facet of fascism, censorship. So we do not understand what it is that's going on now. So it is wiped out. People are told that we can't talk about this because it makes other people feel bad. And that's what we're seeing right now. A few years ago, Lorenzo and I actually wrote a piece. We were talking, excuse me, we were talking about the rise of fascism, and this was a few years ago, so it's been more developed now than it was back then. And we talked about how even before this whole thing about DEI, and you know, I have to say a word here about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. One of the things that if you didn't know, if you had questions about the real reality, the sincerity of DEI, your beliefs would be called into doubt if, like me, one day back in the early stages of Black Lives Matter, you saw this advertisement online from, it was from Visa card. Visa said, Black Lives Matter. Now, what does that tell you? If a corporation like Visa is saying Black Lives Matter, you know, what is this? You know, that showed that this was all a reaction by the corporations to what had happened in Ferguson with Michael Brown Jr. It was a reaction more recently to the murder of George Floyd, which caught a lot of people's attention because we all got to see that. Everyone didn't see Michael Brown being killed in Ferguson, but many of us did see on live television the murder of George Floyd. It was an actual lynching. Police killings today are like the lynchings of the 18th and 19th centuries. And we saw George Floyd being lynched. So when you saw something, when I saw this thing about Visa saying Black Lives Matter, you know, this just showed that this was not a real sincere movement anyway on the part, certainly not of the corporations who all of a sudden began talking about this. The educational institutions, of course, have a commitment to teach diversity, equity, inclusion, but even when the pressure was put on them, as it has been now, what are they doing? They're wiping it out. These big schools like Harvard and Princeton, they're all backing down because their federal funding has been threatened by the Trump regime if they continue to teach these courses. So the whole diversity, equity, inclusion thing was actually somewhat of a myth anyway. It sounded good, and for a while people believed it. It would have been good if it was sincere, but it was not sincere. It was something that was done to pacify people, all right? And when people began to wake up to that, then they started to begin to protest the whole notion, even before the Trump regime was wiping out diversity, equity, and inclusion. I want to get back to this whole issue of, you know, fighting fascism as it relates to literature. One of the biggest censors in the United States of America is the prison system. They constitute the biggest sector of censorship in the United States. Lorenzo can tell you his classic book, Anarchism and the Black Revolution, has been censored in prisons throughout the country. I'm not an expert on what's going on in the rest of the world, but I certainly can tell you it has been censored throughout many prisons in the United States. And this is an area which we often don't think about is censorship behind the walls. And back in the day, when Lorenzo was in prison, and I'm not taking away from what he's going to say because he's got other things to say, but I will take an opportunity to say that when he was in prison, he and other prisoners like him fought against censorship. They fought for the right to read revolutionary literature that was coming out at the time that he went to prison, 1969, 1970. And they won that right. They filed lawsuits, they did whatever they had to do so they could read books, revolutionary books, that the prison authorities did not want them to read. And even in recent times, people who write books about prisons, the prison system, are having to fight authorities who are banning their books because they don't want them to understand what is going on in the prison system in the United States. So this is one area in which we will all have to join. We have to all join together in different areas of the country, different movements, different groups, to fight censorship. This actually starts, in a lot of cases, on the local level. This censorship has started with local school boards who are saying, it's not necessarily big national groups, but local school boards who are banning books, saying their kids can't read books by Black authors, or Latino authors, or LGBTQ authors, okay? These are local school boards who are banning the books. So on a local level, we always talk about all struggles begin on the local level. So if you live in a city or a town where you hear about books being censored or banned by your local school board or your local library board, it starts with the library boards. Don't be silent. You have to speak up, because if people silence is one of the things that fascism grows on. If nobody says anything, the fascists think, well, they must think this is okay. We'll keep on doing it. We'll keep on proceeding. But you have to speak up. And you don't have to you don't necessarily have to go to a big demonstration in Washington, D.C. or New York. And there's nothing wrong with that. But we all live in a local area, a local town. So listen to what is going on in your community. If you hear about censorship and book banning in whatever the town is you live on, and you don't hear anybody speaking about it, gather together 2 or 3 of your friends. Don't try to do it by yourself, but get people who know that you know, who think like you think, to go to these meetings and protest this kind of censorship and this kind of banning. Because they do it in one place, they're doing it everywhere. They want to wipe out anything that goes against what they want the new norm to be. They want this country to be a return to what they consider to be its white Christian roots, okay? And there's a lot of discussion about the fact that the United States was created as a Christian society, and there are some people who disagree with that. I'm not a theologian, so I'm not going to go into that. But at any rate, we know that in this country right now, that many people in America are not Christian. There are many people who are Muslim, as long as being Jewish and other religions. But the fascists don't want that. They want this to become once again known as a white Christian society. They want this to be a society also in which women do not have any rights. I'm someone who was, I'm 77 years old. I was a young woman when the feminist movement began. Black women, in many cases, had to start our own feminist movement because America is a racist society, and Black women encountered racism in the white feminist movement. But at any rate, feminism was changing American society, the way it looked at women and what women could do. Women had to stay in the home. They had to raise children. They had to be good cooks. They had to know how to sew. Cooking and sewing were 2 things that when I was in 7th and 8th grade messed up my GPA. I was an A student, except when it came to cooking and sewing, because I didn't want to be a mother or a wife. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that was not my aspiration. But growing up in a period of the growth of the feminist movement, I felt fine about my choice. I did not have to do that if I did not want to do it. But now we're living in a country where they want to go back to the good old days. They are even, I don't know whether you saw it or not, but a few months ago they were talking about paying women to have babies, to have children. Now, this was limited to married women because they wanted very specifically only for married females to have children. They were not talking about in unmarried women. But that's what they want. They want to go back to those days of the, I guess, the nuclear family. And don't get me wrong, I grew up in a nuclear family with a mother and a father. It was a good family. I had good parents. I had a very happy childhood. But you can't force things on people. If people do not choose to have that kind of life, if they want a different kind of life, they have the right to have it. But the fascists don't want that. They want us all to fit into a certain category. They also want to take away the right of women to have control over our bodies by doing away with the right of abortion in this country. And that was something that was also fought for. And that was a very important thing when Roe versus Wade, I remember I was, I don't know, what, 24, 25 years old when Roe versus Wade passed the US Supreme Court. And that was very important for young women like myself who, you know, if we were in a situation where we did not want to have children, we did not have to. And again, it's a personal decision. I'm not here to advocate one way or the other about that. But I will say this, that is a woman has a right to choose. But I feel for the young women today, I have, you know, great nieces and nieces, and who may be losing the right to control what they want to do in terms of families and children. And this is all part of, you know, the rise of the fascist state, trying to have a cookie cutter model of what family life should be. And a lot of times we don't think about that. We don't think about that as being an aspect of fascism, but it is. And I know I've deviated from censorship, but one thing pops in my mind when you get older, one thing pops in your mind, and sometimes you think of another thing. So I apologize for that. Chalk it up to having a senior moment. And I have a lot of those being a senior. But we have to fight the censorship. We have to fight this whole thing about controlling what we read and what we think, control over media. You know, I'm not a late night TV fan, so I wasn't someone who tuned in to Jimmy Kimmel every night to watch his show. But the fact that they wanted that off the air, that they at least temporarily forced it off the air because they were critical of the Trump regime, lets you know, the extent to which fascism is taking root in this country. Jimmy Kimmel's not a revolutionary. I don't think so, is he? Unless I missed something. He's not a revolutionary, but he just, doesn't like Trump, and he said when he says it, he doesn't like it. Trump doesn't like that. So we have to look at the people who are being censored, many of whom are far from being radicals and far from being revolutionaries, and not forget the important part that plays in the rise and the growth of the fascist state. I want to read a passage from one other thing. I read that. If we go back to the history of enslavement, we had censorship even then, when you think about it. This is not a new thing, because the slave master did not want the enslaved Africans to be able to read or to write. And if you studied any black history, you know that. That was a form of censorship. They did not want my great-great-grandparents and their children to have any knowledge of history, to be able to understand what had happened in the world, what was going on around them in the world. So censorship has just progressed through the ages in different forms, but it is not a new phenomenon. And it's important, not to remember that, not to forget that. If you live in a period in which you're thinking, well, things used to be really bad, but they're not as bad as they used to be. But the reality of it is we need to be able to remember when things were bad. We don't ever want to get to the point when we cannot remember, or maybe not physically remember, but be able to read a book or an article, or turn on YouTube and see a video. We need to remember when things were really bad, because that's only how we are able to build a new society, build a new world. It's a cliche, I realize, to say those who do not learn from the mistakes of the past will repeat them. Well, you cannot learn the mistakes of the past if you have censorship, all right? If that knowledge and that information is taken from you. The author, writer, activist, William C. Anderson, who is the producer of the podcast that Lorenzo and I do, the Black Autonomy Podcast, he recently published an article for Prism Reports. This article is entitled "Another Way Out: How Denying Reality Aids Fascism." And that is a whole nother topic, because we have many people in this society who don't want to deal with what is going on, who are living, they're saying, well, this is only going to last as long as Trump is in office. Once he's out of office, everything will be okay. Well, even people like Gavin Newsom, governor of California, who is no radical, who is no revolutionary, even Newsom is saying we may not have a presidential election in 2028, okay? So we can no longer live in the reality of this fake world of we will have a revolution and we'll get out of what the situation we're in. In his article, William Anderson wrote on how denying reality aids fascism. This is part of what he said, and I think that it really gets to what we need to understand today. And I quote from him, he's talking about the history of the record of the horrors, and this is like a quote, the horrors that black people have been subjected to. These are the stories that are now being whitewashed and erased from the public by the Trump administration, targeting history that paints the U.S. in a negative light. There's a reason that it's essential to know about these atrocities and emphasize them. You have to grasp how bad things have been, but here to understand how much worse they can get. This tension is one of the most significant aspects of denial's danger, how it is buried. History, and I continue the quote, history isn't just about saying things used to be bad and they're not anymore. It also warns us about inheritance. A liberal relationship with history creates a false romance with a happy ending that doesn't exist. End of quote. There's not going to be a happy ending to what we are going through right now unless we organize and we fight and we build a united movement to fight censorship. And when we do that will, and as we do that, fighting censorship, we will be striking a blow against fascism in the United States. We have to wake up. We cannot live in a fantasy world. We have to unite. And I'll leave it at that for now.
What I want to talk about briefly is black anarchism. I don't know whether you know this or not, and you probably don't, but black anarchism actually started here in Atlanta. We created the Black Autonomy Anarchist Federation in this city. And it started with just going to a school. I think it was Atlanta University, one of the campuses at Clark University, or Clark College. And we went there, and it was all set up for me to just come in and start speaking. The teacher wanted to play hooky or something. And so I came in and started talking about black activism and then talking about anarchists. I've been an anarchist for 56 years now. And I actually learned about anarchism when I went to prison in 1969. I was taught by a black anarchist named Martin Sostre, who at that time was the best known political prisoner in the world. But anyway, he had politically educated me. He had changed my thinking from where I was at the time in terms of, having been in the civil rights movement, having been in, even the Black Panther Party and other organizations, and the period that was going on at the time. And he was politically educating me about why the world was the way it was at that moment in history, why the so-called Soviet Union and the other state oppressive governments were falling apart at that moment in history, why the United States was posturing as the leader of the so-called free world, and we ain't seen no free world yet, but they were posturing that they were leading it. And all these things made me come back when they arrested me and brought me back to the United States. And I talked to Martin Sostre and made me become an anarchist. He was my mentor. I can't go into a long, drawn-out discussion about who Martin Sostre is. If you want to know about Martin Sostre now, there's a book outside this door about Martin Sostre. So, you have available source material. But we created a movement to get back to 1994 here in Atlanta. Myself and some other activists that I worked with at that time, and these students, we created the first Black Autonomy Anarchist Federation. And the thing about new political ideas, they're often challenged, always challenged. They are never really respected. And they're small. They're small. It's like a baby. It starts out small. What is that thing going to become something? You don't know, no one can tell. But the idea, the power of the idea meets the desire and the need for struggle. And I don't believe in creating organizations or groups that strictly are about cults, about the leader or whatever. The reason to create movements, in my mind, and has always been to fight the government, fight the state. And it doesn't make any difference if the state is a so-called democracy, which is patently false, created on slavery, created on racism, created on the destruction and the weakness of people throughout this country and all over the world. It's an empire. And once we understand that, it has taken all these years in political discussion that I've ever heard somebody say, America is an empire. America has America has 950 military bases all over the world. Now, you have to understand these things because then you'll understand why we have a fascist regime today. The original Black Panther Party used to say, and this is where I learned my anti-fascist ideology, we are already a fascist government and already a fascist state. Just because white people aren't suffering from it doesn't mean it's not happening to others. It's not happening to black people. It's not happening to various other peoples who lived in this country and been persecuted, wiped out, like in the case of the Native Americans. So this thinking created first the idea. the idea that went into this book. I first wrote this book in 1979. I was in Marion Federal Penitentiary, and I was looking at possibly dying at that moment. This was a concentration camp. This prison was so vile that there were other prison officials from racist regimes like in South Africa. At that time, Iran had the Shah, which was a dictator, and others would come to the United States, to this prison, to study how they were using it to destroy the will of prisoners, to try to destroy the will of prisoners. Since we fought back, that's the whole thing about it. Fascism cannot defeat you if you fight back. We was in the hell of I was in the hell of the worst prison in the world at that time, and we had built a movement, even in this prison, even this deadly place, deathly place. We had built a movement of unity. It didn't matter what your race was, didn't matter what, anything, as long as you would stand up to the man. And so I went through this time in Marion. They had a strike there. They shut the place down for several months. I started writing. And I started writing about anarchism. And I had been an anarchist for 10 years by that time. 1979 is what I'm talking about. And I started laying out ideas. One, that the anarchist movement was making a grave error by not connecting with and uniting with the black movement and the anti-colonial movements throughout the world. That was one of the things I was poised to say, is that you're making a mistake. And I've been saying that for years. I've never disguised the fact that I had political differences. And ultimately, these political differences led me to the point of realizing that I was approaching this all wrong. Instead of trying to get black people to join the anarchist movement, or join these groups, that is, we should create our own movement based on these ideas, based on revolutionary black nationalism as put forth by the Black Panther Party, and that by doing this, then we have a movement that no matter how minuscule it is at this particular moment, it can open many minds, open many eyes, and can build a new insurgency, a new fight back movement. And so we're here at that moment, you see. We're here at that moment. Whether we realize it or not, we will only survive if we unite, if we understand that we cannot win if we don't practice solidarity politics, revolutionary solidarity politics. I don't care what party you're in and all this other stuff. I've worked with all kinds of groups. When I worked in this city and in Chattanooga, I got groups to come from here, Atlanta, and other cities to come to Chattanooga where the Ku Klux Klan ran the government. And it's no fictional or representation, it was real. The Klan ran the government, they were in the police force, and they were committing murder. Chattanooga, Tennessee in the 1980s and 90s had the highest number of police murders of any city in the United States, under 200,000 people. And what made it even worse was an FBI agent, a former FBI agent that just left the FBI, was running the city as the mayor. And all these people were being murdered, and he would cover it up. He covered it up. So this is the kind of reality that when I got out of prison, I came home to. So we started fighting this. We started fighting this. And this little group that I'd worked on and built a movement here, did so many things. In the city of Atlanta, we were the ones who fought at the time of the 1996 Olympics. They wanted to turn MARTA over to white suburbanites. And they were changing the board and all this stuff. We resisted that. We organized a mass movement, the Atlanta Transit Riders Union. We organized it and we fought back. And so we were building a movement. We weren't building a movement through rhetoric. We were building a movement through organizing, going into the streets, doing community-based organizing, talking to people about their conditions, devising a way to fight back, you see. I'm not ever about some kind of apology to some fascist or some big politician that waged a war and killed millions of brown and black or other peoples around the world. I'm not ever going to respect those people. That's why I became an anarchist. I don't respect the government. I don't want to see these pigs stay in power. And in point of fact, what I say is that we need to organize a movement that's strong enough to win over people. I think anarchism needs what I used to call back in the day a mass line. We need to be able to talk to people. We need to be able to send organizers. In this city, you know, the first time we organized Black Autonomy, we went to Capitol Homes. And we went to Capitol Homes to unite with the people there who were facing bulldozers who were going to destroy, you know, their communities. So that by the time the tourists got here, everything would be spick and span, you know, but the people would be pushed out or put in jail or who knows what. We built a movement and we worked with the people there to at least hold it. We held it back for years, just like we held back the attempt to raise the fare for years. And these are things that are day-to-day, or what Sister calls, what JoNina calls bread and butter issues. You cannot fight and win if you don't raise issues where people are concerned. This is one of the reasons why we don't have a revolution and could be pushing back these pigs now. We need to understand that our resistance is the only thing that will prevent these people from committing the kind of crimes that they committed in Nazi Germany. We have a fascist regime. We're not talking about fascists in the streets or some punks. We're talking about the people who actually control the system. And we're talking about not just fighting them, but also fighting the billionaire class at the same time. So somebody says, well, he talked about a lot of things, but he didn't say anything about the billionaires. It's intrinsic that we have to fight the billionaires. We have to come up with a strategy to destroy their means of production. Instead of just calling the capitalists. Well, people get so tired of the capitalists are doing this, the capitalists are doing that. Who are the damn capitalists? They're billionaires. We know their names. And they're sitting right now in the government. It's not enough for them. It's not enough for them to just pay a politician off like they usually do, and they have been now. Now they want to sit in the government and actually run it. They want to steal the money from the government while they're sitting in power. You know what I'm saying? So 13 members of Trump's administration are billionaires. That means a hell of a lot. That's never happened before. So we understand we are living with history. No matter how bad it is or how bad it seems, we are living with history. We can change history. We can destroy fascism. I mean, this is not a secret. I mean, this is the United States. Some people think, well, this surely isn't fascism. It's the United States. It can't happen here. I used to hear that all the time, all the time. back in the day. And JoNina could attest to this, that people used to always say that when we were saying that people were spying on us, that the government was spying on us and the government was, setting people up to be killed and all that. Oh, you're just paranoid. You're crazy. Don't listen to him, And then 4 young people broke into an FBI office in Media, Pennsylvania in 1971, and they unearthed the files that we now know as counterintelligence program, COINTELPRO. Were it not for that, people would still be walking around in circles. I want to tell you something that took me a long time to understand. Richard Nixon, who was the president at that time in the 1960s, and up to 1974 when he was driven out of office, Richard Nixon was trying to do the exact same thing that Donald Trump is doing right now. So it's happened before. What stopped him? They want you to believe that some newspaper writers stopped them. They want you to believe that some Congress people, even some from the South that were segregationists, all these people, they want you to believe that this is what stopped them. But in point of fact, Richard Nixon had been doing spying, assassination, all kinds of stuff against the left for years. And when they broke off those files and they exposed it, and then Nixon goes in and he tries to spy on his so-called loyal opposition, and they caught it, then he was put in a political situation, and the country was put in a political situation where they would have to make a decision. The same decision right now. The difference is that the Black Panther Party was still around, still alive. The New Left, the radical feminists, and the radical the gay liberation movement, and all these movements were around, and they were able to build a coalition, an anti-fascist coalition. And it's the same, if you ask me. Now, I don't know everything. In 1969, I was on the run, but there was a conference by the Black Panther Party in 1969 in Berkeley, was it? Oakland, okay. I'll get it straight. And that conference was an anti-fascist conference that attracted 5,000 activists. All the major groups in the United States came to this conference. And they didn't immediately get it together. There was, as you know, something new is going to always run into conflict. It was created to stop the government from destroying the Black Panther Party first. But beyond that, it was designed to stop the government, or certain elements in the government, like Richard Nixon, from creating a coup and a personal dictatorship, which is what's happening right now. This is what's happening right now. But here's the catcher. The movement was powerful. It was popular. And even with the counterintelligence program and all this other stuff, the movement was able to drop Nixon, to put Nixon in the situation where he was defeated. And he had to step down and leave office. Now, I said there's the story, the popular story is that, the white liberals on Capitol Hill and the dogged reporters at the Washington Post, why they did the greatest job and they stopped Nixon and his group of thugs, which is an out-and-out lie. The work was done way before this happened. The only reason Nixon even attempted to spy on the so-called loyal opposition is because he was pressed. He was pressed by the left. He was pressed by the left's coalition, anti-fascist coalition. It existed. It stopped him. So we have a real living example of what can happen. Now, a lot of people at the time didn't believe this. People for years fell into this propaganda line about who drove Nixon out and how was Nixon defeated. And there's been this mythology. But the mythology is designed to just stop us from realizing and thinking that if we get together, if we can build a movement, whatever we call it, you can call it anything, call it all power to the people, if you want to. But you can build a movement, and that movement can stop what's happening right now. And the thing is, they know it. The fascists know it. They want to present the image of absolute confidence. We know what we're doing, and if the left will just allow us to do so, we'll go ahead and get a fascist regime here. If the left will allow us to do it. That was actually said by the guy at the Heritage Foundation. See, sometimes these people tell you stuff into your face. Well, we're going to and hang all of you, and people think they're just talking. Don't take him serious. He's an idiot. No, they're telling you what is this in store. But rather than inspire fear, because they want to inspire fear, because fear can stop you. Fear can make you think that you don't have any power to do this. How can we go up against such esteemed, rich people? How could we do that? Why would we do that? We must understand our strength. We understand our strength, we can change the world. And we must change the world because they're putting us in a position that we have to fight fascism. We don't, I've got to the point where I used to hear all this kind of academic, semi-academic garbage about what fascism is. And people, well, you know that if fascism really existed, well, you'd be wiped out. All you black people would be wiped out. That may be what you want to have happen, Or you know that if the fascists were really in power, they could do anything they want, and they wouldn't have they wouldn't even have a country or whatever. There's so much nonsense that people will tell you with the express purpose of stopping you, controlling you, and making you lose heart. And we're at that moment in history. And it doesn't happen all the time. It only happens so frequent in history. But we're at that moment in time where we actually can stop them. Our numbers, our belief, our love for each other is unstoppable.
I think that's a great place to maybe transition us. Thank you so much, JoNina and Lorenzo. So now we'll move into a little bit of Q&A. If folks would like, there's a microphone here on the side. Feel free to stand up and ask some questions. Thank you both.
Hi, quick question. I know that Firestorm Books is selling your books. Would you be open to signing after the talk? Okay, thank you.
Hello, thank you for all of everything and the work that you did. I'm a part of BAPT, Black Alliance for Peace, which is an anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist org as well. I just had a question about doing revolutionary work and people's individual commitments to families and their personal time. How were you able to, or what do you have to kind of say about that or advice to give for that? Because I know a lot of times folks are focused on, your individual self or families or their spouses or their children and the sacrifice that it takes to kind of do revolutionary work and consequences that can come from that. So kind of what advice do you have for that?
Hello? Can you hear me? Okay. That's actually the book that I recently wrote, Driven by the Movement, Reports from the Black Power Era, that's what I was trying to put across in my book. I interviewed everyday people in the community who were Black Power activists, and they were, in some cases, single mothers who had to figure out child care if they had to go to a meeting or if they had to go out of town. They were just everyday people, you know, living everyday lives. You have to have a balance. One of the things you have to one of the things that I try to tell young people particularly is that you have to avoid burnout. Burnout is something that, and I even hear young people, Gen Z and millennials, talk about burnout. And these are people that are 40 and 50 years younger than me. And I said, wow, they're already dealing with burnout. That's not good. It's not good at all. You have to pace yourself. You have to take time for yourself. And there may be times when you have to say that a task that you were assigned, you can't do it this time. Could somebody else do it, or can somebody help you? You may have to take a break for a while to deal with your own mental, physical health. If you have children, you know, that you have to care for, younger children or other family members, of course you want to care for them. And we should not guilt each other about people who need to take time to do that, because none of us would be here if it wasn't for our families. If it wasn't for our parents, we wouldn't be here. If those who have children, you love your children, you want them to get all the nurturing and love they can get. So you have to balance it. One of the mistakes that the Black Panther Party made was that we tried to do this work 24/7. We were on duty all the time. Now, that doesn't mean we never got any sleep, but we didn't get that much sleep. It took years and years, almost to the end of the party's existence, we finally figured out that people have to have time out, time off. And we finally realized that. We thought we were and we were, in fact, we were in a war against the United States government. And we felt like, well, you know, if you're in a war against somebody, you don't get any time out. We didn't really understand what we were up against totally. But you have to have time out for yourself, because if your own personal, mental, and physical health is not good, you cannot do activist work. You cannot do revolutionary work. Because if you are not healthy, you can't perform at your utmost. So I would just encourage everyone to remember to take time for yourself. If you work in a group, to talk about the importance of people needing to take time off. Or maybe the group has to not do every single big march and rally they had planned to do, because maybe they needed to pause for a couple of weeks or whatever. That's very important.
I wanted to say, yeah, thank you for coming up here and speaking with us. One of the main things that one of the main things that I go through or experience, especially studying Black anarchism and getting into that, is dealing with kind of a split perspective of living in the United States and struggling with that, and wanting to know what you guys go, I guess kind of help with processing that, but also when working with organizations or with other people, knowing, I know that the fight is always worth the fight, but knowing that those people, certain people that you're working with, is worth to fight with them or to let them go as well.
Yeah, maybe, Galed, could we turn the microphone up a little bit? We'll find Galed in a second. Would you mind repeating your question,
Yeah.
or at least the last part of it? Thank you.
When working with organizations, obviously the fight is always worth the fight, but when you're working with certain people who might not get it, like knowing when to let them go or how to help get them on the same page with you with the fight.
You have to, first of all, train people to be organized. You got to know when to, you have to train people to be an organizer. I used to resist that notion when I first, as a kid, came out as an organizer. You know, I didn't know any better. But if you train people to be organizers, there's a more serious commitment because there's more understanding of why you're struggling. If a person just jumps into something emotionally, they may not last. In most instances, they don't last. Like Sister JoNina was saying, you know, you find burnout. And so if you train people, then you can rely on people, you know, and because people have an understanding they're fighting for their very lives. That's what we need to understand. I've had people in dire situations. I can't describe the incident for legal reasons, but I've had people who we were supposed to have done something, a very dangerous move, and they turned, they left. They didn't stitch me out, they just left and left me in a situation where I had to decide whether I was gonna fight or give up or whatever, because I was trapped. I had to move forward or I might have died there in the spot. So I learned then that, you know, the failure to train people that you can trust means a lot. This is all right. Is that good?
So I just wanted to say thank you, like everybody else, for coming out and speaking with us. You brought up the group that went into the COINTELPRO offices in Media, Pennsylvania, and how they, you know, they risked their lives and risked their jobs to get that information regarding COINTELPRO out to the public. And I can't say the specific library system that I work for, but I've been presented with a situation where I have to sign a form. It's called a loyalty oath, in which I'll have to basically sign my, you know, I'm not going to criticize the government, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. And so I have until November 14th to sign it. And so my question to you guys is, how would you navigate this situation as somebody who is dedicated to anarchism, dedicated to, you know, Afro-pessimism, Afrofuturism, dedicated, well, not even just specifically Afrofuturism, but all people's liberation movements all over the world? How do you navigate that as well? Like, because I don't want to lose my job, basically. I work in the library system. I work with homeless population, disabled populations. I'm able to give a lot of help in the area that I'm in. But if I don't sign this form, there's a pretty high likelihood I will lose that job. And so what is some advice that you guys have to navigate that tightrope? Because I'm kind of at a wit's end, and this is like the perfect opportunity to ask somebody who quite literally you have sacrificed more than any of us can say to this movement, and going into prison and sacrificing. Just, you know, yeah, that's my question basically. But yeah, sorry if I rambled.
Let me say, I don't want to put you personally in a situation where you're following what I say and you lose your livelihood. But at the same time, you know, the old saying that you can't serve two masters, you have to make a choice. And sometimes the choice could be life-threatening. I had to make a choice that almost got me killed, that had me serve 15 years in prison, and could have had me serve the rest of my life in prison. So those are real serious choices. This is a serious choice. But then again, it's a question of what you believe in and what you actually believe in. And there may be a way around that. I would say even talk to an attorney. I would say that as well. But, you know, you have to make the determination in the final analysis. The so-called good job that people talk about all the time, you know, I got a good job and so forth. You know, I'm not making light of it. Don't get that impression.
Of course not.
That's a serious thing. That's a serious thing. You got to give up your livelihood, or you got to refuse to do what they say you have to do. I think one of the things that the fascists are trying to do in this period is put people in this position. Put people in this position. And I think that we have to be able to organize. When do you have to have the decision?
November 14th. So about
Well,
2-3
up until
weeks.
then, I would be sitting back and doing some research and talking to some people, their comrades or whatever, that you can get some good advice and take it from there. I wouldn't just run up there and do one or the other until I'm ready to know, you know what I'm saying, what it is to do. I do think that all of us are going to be in a situation like this soon, you know, as a possibility. I'm not saying that's going to happen tomorrow. He said this thing is November 14th, so he got a few days, you know. But trying to find light in it. But, you know, it's a serious thing. We're in a situation right now where we're seeing the spread and the building of a fascist states of America. And that is where you have no rights at all. They want to come in already and take away your rights that have been long fought for. JoNina talked about what they're doing to the women's rights movement, and to women, period. And they're going to do this to all of us. That's why we got to find solidarity. We got to find a basis of solidarity. That doesn't mean that I agree with everything you say. Doesn't mean I agree with everything you do. But it does mean that if we don't come together on some level, we will be wiped. I hate to say it like this. We'll be wiped the fuck out. Yeah. I mean, that's just the truth. And so it's important to get over your fear. Get over your ignorance. Because some things, and when I say ignorance, I'm not disrespecting anyone. What I'm saying, and someone told me a long time ago, there's two different things when you say a person is stupid and a person is ignorant. A person is ignorant means that they don't know. He's asking a question. He doesn't know. And we may or may not be able to provide it to him. We will say to you, step back, remove the emotion to the degree you can, and think it out. And then, like I said, go and talk to others. Go to talk to other people in the movement. If nobody's willing to help you, then you can't work with those people anyway. But that's what I would say to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we got time for one more question. Sorry, everybody.
Sorry.
Thanks.
Thank you guys, first and foremost. I discovered your book a year ago, and never could I have imagined being in this place, having this opportunity to hear you in person speak. So I thank you for that. In terms of you guys' long, meaningful life and journey, what is I guess, one of the most important things that you have evolved in your thinking?
A built-in bullshit detector. That's a joke. No, you know, each one of us has lived a different life. She was in the Black Panther Party for many years. I was in for literally a very small period of time before I went to prison for life. We learned different lessons. You know, we kind of talked about this, you know. What I learned, what I was subjected to, required me to survive physical and mental torture. And I learned what my limitations are. And I learned the things that, you know, because they're trying to break you in prison, and especially in a political prison. Like I always make the point, I wasn't in just any prison. I was in the highest security prison at that time in the world. And it also was a behavior modification unit where they were trying to break your mind. There's a book, you might be able to find it, called Breaking Men's Minds at Marion, Illinois. If you can see that book, if you find it online or whatever, you should read it. So you'll get an understanding of what I'm talking about. But that was what I learned, was one, we had to have unity. The prisoners had to unite or we would not survive. We couldn't have somebody ratting us out or something. Everybody had to unite against the guards. The guards were the enemy. The prison officials were the enemy, and that was just it. There was no discussion, no nothing, you know. And because they couldn't get us to break, they were defeated. Now, you just imagine this. Inside the prison system, the strongest prison system in the world, because we're talking about the federal system, federal prison system, run by the government, and we were able to break their will. They didn't break our will. We defeated their regime. We defeated the Klan system that they had in the federal prisons. You know, they had these Klansmen and Nazis that they were bringing from California and all this kind of stuff to try to break the will of the prisoners. I'm not saying what we did to those people, but we got them out of there. I'm not pleading guilty to, you know, I'm not a fool, you know. But this is the kind of thing that I learned, is the unity of the prisoners, or the unity of the people, is how you can defeat the strongest forces possible.
One of the things I learned was that, you know, and people have written about this, is that, you know, you are going to, as you, in the process of fighting for liberation, you're going to go through various stages, and you're going to have periods when you will have tremendous victories. There may be stalemates, and you will have tremendous losses. It's a mix, and you have to be able to somehow, you know, survive those, especially the losses, and keep on going. Do what you need to do to rebuild your strength and energy. But it's like the late black sociologist Robert Allen said, you know, revolutionary movements. It's not a straight line. It's not, you know, you don't start from A and you get to Z and you've won. It's going to be all kind of twists and turns. And that's one thing I had to come to understand and learn. Oh, one more thing I want to say before we close out is that we have a couple of two different books up here. One is written by myself and Lorenzo. The other one is written by Ashanti Alston and William C. Anderson. And we'd appreciate it if you could give $5 or a donation, and also to contribute to our podcast, help us do our work. Black Autonomy Podcast, you can contribute to our work through Patreon. If you go to the Black Autonomy Podcast website, you will see our Patreon link. And if you would like to contact us, it's organize.the.hood@gmail.com.
Thank you both so much, JoNina and Lorenzo Ervin. JoNina is the author of Driven by the Movement, Reports from the Black Power Era, and Lorenzo is the author of Anarchism and the Black Revolution, both available outside in the main hall for purchase. Thanks, everybody, for coming.